Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Kinship Podcast. Today, we are diving into something that is deceptively simple yet profoundly transformative. We are going to be talking about boundaries and space. Now, one of the things that often comes up in my one-on-one coaching conversations with dog women is invariably their relationship with boundaries. While some have very clear and often rigid boundaries, some really struggle with boundaries. And so it's definitely a theme that I think is so relevant and meaningful and has so much emotional and learned context around it. So I am really excited to deep dive into this. Now, I want to start by saying that boundaries are not walls. And I know that that is often an understanding that a lot of women carry, even if they know that that's not true theoretically in their bodies, that the embodied understanding of boundaries feel like walls. Boundaries are actually relational, invisible threads that protect your energy, that honor your needs, that allow love to flow without really losing yourself. They show up in the way that you attune to people, to the animals you love, in how you co-regulate energy with your partner, and even in the quiet moments with your dog when you're just feeling each other's presence. Boundaries are relational tools. They help you love without losing yourself. And here's the beautiful part. How we navigate boundaries is very much tied to our empowered guardian archetype. So today we'll be exploring your relationship with boundaries and space through the lens of your empowered guardian archetype. So whether you're a companion, a steward, a reclaimer, or a protector, we will dive into how each of these archetypes actually approaches boundaries in relationships, whether that's with partners, with friends, with your dogs, who pretty much reflect that energy and presence back to us. My hope is that by the end of this episode, you will be able to recognize your patterns, see where love and safety have shaped your boundaries, and feel empowered to hold space for yourself in a loving, intuitive, and sometimes delightfully wild way. So let's get started. Now, this one is for all the companions in the house. If you resonate with this archetype, your heart is your compass. You feel the energy of others deeply, and your emotional radar is always on. You notice the tiny shifts in a partner's mood, the subtle stress in your friend's voice, or the quiet longing in your dog's gaze. Companions have a gift for attunement. They co-regulate quite effortlessly, often without even thinking about it. But this beautiful sensitivity also comes with a challenge. Saying no can feel almost impossible. Boundaries feel risky because you learned early on that love is earned by your attentiveness, by your ability to keep others comfortable and cared for. Now, this shows up in everyday life in ways that are both charming and exhausting. Your dog might curl up against you while you're trying to work, and instead of gently moving or kind of taking a break, you melt into them because, well, they need you. Your partner might suggest plans that feel draining, and you say yes because you don't want to disappoint. Even when your body or mind is whispering, I just need a moment for myself. Your heart worries about the ripple effects. Honestly, humor helps here because let's be real. You know you're a companion when your dog, quote unquote, helps you write emails, maybe with their paw on your arm or their chin on your leg, eyes pleading, and you actually let them because that just feels like a moment for that emotional harmony. But this isn't about weakness. This is about a love that runs really deep. And so the key growth for companions is learning to give themselves permission to say a gentle, loving no. Saying no doesn't shrink your heart, it preserves it. Even 10 minutes of alone time, a quiet cup of tea, or a simple boundary with a partner can ripple out to make your relationships feel safer, healthier, more connected, and definitely more nourishing. So here's a reflection for you, my dear companions. Where in your life are you overgiving because you equate saying no with being unlovable? Recognizing that is the first step toward creating boundaries that honor your heart while still keeping connection alive. All right, let's move to the stewards in the room now. Stewards are the architects of care and stability. Their love is expressed through structure, thoughtfulness, and a steady hand. They notice when a partner or dog needs calm, reassurance, or a predictable rhythm. A steward's attunement is practical, but also deeply relational. They create containers in which everyone feels safe and seen. But the challenge arises when that structure becomes too rigid. Boundaries are meant to protect, yet they can sometimes feel like rules we must obey rather than living, breathing relational tools. So imagine this. You notice your dog becoming restless and you calmly sit beside them, just breathing slowly, syncing your energy. You co-regulating, offering safety without words, teaching them that it's okay to feel and to pause. With your partner, you may schedule regular walks or shared meals to ensure connection, which is loving. But if your boundaries feel too fixed, spontaneity and flow can get stifled. The lessons you learned early about love and safety often emphasized predictability. If you do everything right all the time, everyone is safe, happy, and love is secure. So imagine that you've scheduled quiet cuddle time with your dog and partner down to the minute. Set an alarm for it and feel a proud little surge because love and connection are organized and safe. That is stewardship in action. But flexibility is just as powerful. Notice where bending the schedule just a tiny bit actually deepens connection and preserves your energy, perhaps even creates moments of lightness and levity. This is the steward's journey, learning that love can thrive in unpredictability also, and that sometimes bending rules is an act of care rather than chaos. So here's my invitation to you, my dear stewards. Where in your life are your boundaries rooted in control or fear of consequence rather than love and attunement? Allow yourself to lean into relational flow while still honoring your energy. And now let's meet the reclaimer. Independent, intense, and protective of their emotional space, reclaimers learned early that closeness can carry risk. Boundaries became survival tools, ways to preserve energy and trust in a world where love could feel unpredictable. Reclaimers approach connection carefully, often balancing deep relational attunement with the need to retreat and reset. Imagine co-regulating with your dog after a long day. You retreat to a quiet corner with a blanket and your dog curls against you, sharing presence in this mutual pause. You're honoring your need for space, and your dog reflects back calm, attuned presence. With a partner, this might look like needing time alone after a busy week. you might withdraw briefly, not because you don't love them, but because replenishing your energy allows you to show up fully. The reclaimer's challenge, however, is that boundaries can feel like walls. And if they're not communicated, partners or friends might feel shut out. Humor helps here. You know you're a reclaimer when you've disappeared for a few hours and your dog stares at you like, oh, we're both here together. And yet it's quiet, relational, and deeply restorative. Growth for reclaimers is actually in communication. Letting others know that your retreat is about restoration, not rejection, transforms boundaries from barriers into bridges. So, something for you to think about. Where are you pulling away when you could invite relational closeness with clarity and intention? Co-regulating your energy while honoring space is the reclaimer's art, and it is deeply, fiercely loving. And finally, let's explore the protector. Loyal, vigilant, and deeply attuned. Protectors shape boundaries around care and safety, not just for themselves, but for everyone they love. Their boundaries are relational, not punitive. They exist to create containers in which intimacy can thrive without fear. The challenge, however, is knowing when protection becomes over-restriction, when boundaries intended to safeguard actually begin to limit freedom or trust. Think about the quiet moments with your dog. They nuzzle into you during a storm and you co-regulate together, offering presence and calm. There are no commands, none of that alpha bullshit, just attunement. With your partner, you might notice subtle shifts in their presence and energy and hold relational space so that both of you feel safe to express vulnerability. The protector's gift is this deep relational awareness, this ability to read and respond to emotional currents with care. Humor here is gentle. You know you're a protector when your dog nudges you for reassurance during a difficult moment, and you spend 10 minutes sinking breath and energy, both of you silently communicating. We're okay. We're here together. Growth for protectors comes in trust. Trusting others' judgment. Trusting that love can flourish even when you step back lightly. Boundaries can be flexible containers of care rather than walls. And so something to just think about. Where are your boundaries driven by fear rather than love and attunement? Now, if you're like me, or if you're processing this like me, I am actually relating to all of these different relationships with boundaries across these archetypes. And, that's absolutely okay. So I just want to call that out, right? Because again, our relationship with boundaries is also so deeply contextual, and it is not in isolation of the other in the relationship, right? So, for example, when, I'm out with my dogs and, we want to meet new dogs, I can very much kind of become like set boundaries like a protector, right? Where I'm just like, no, we need to just keep ourselves safe all the time. And one of the ways that joy and playfulness and connection has flourished in that very specific interaction for me is when I have learned to step back a little bit and actually trust my dog's capacity for also setting boundaries, right? Similarly, for example, I really relate with how, a reclaimer sets boundaries. That's pretty much how I do it as well. Even though, by the way, my archetype is a companion, right? But I do set boundaries like a reclaimer in very specific relationships of mine. And I recognize that a lot of the times, the lack of communication around retreating, around taking a break can come across as a barrier, can come across as, oh, I'm not interested. I'm coming across as emotionally distant. And so I definitely see the merit in proactively communicating to some of these relationships that, listen, me stepping back, or me, hibernating for some time is not me being emotionally distant. It's just really the way that I kind of recuperate and, just come back into a little bit of energy, right? I think similarly, for example, in some ways, especially when, um, when my partner and I have been feeling quite disconnected from each other, we've not been able to kind of spend time together. I will often actually schedule, you know, date nights into our calendar. And on some days, I will feel like, oh my God, no, we just have to do the date night because it's scheduled. And irrespective of how each of us is feeling, and it's something that we just have to go through. And so that's a very steward driven relationship with a boundary, and with how I kind of approach that specific situation, right? I know that when I was, when I had Lucci and Mutton, I had a really, really hard time with boundaries around them. And so I was really struggling to say no, or to create, time and space for myself outside of a dog mom. And so our relationship with boundaries, one, is ever evolving, and you can very well relate to each of the archetypes' relationships with boundaries. I think an invitation really is to think about in what contexts are they coming up for you, in what situations are they coming up for you. Because again, when this comes down to a relational space, it's not just about you, but you're also responding to the people that you are in relationship with, and that can also shape how you set boundaries. So that's just an invitation to think a little bit about, right? But yeah, I think just kind of putting this together to say that boundaries are mirrors. They reflect, lessons that we've learned in love and safety, and perhaps even consequence very early in life. And so, you know, perhaps the companion archetype has learned that love is conditional on attunement, right? A steward has learned that love is safe when it's predictable. A reclaimer has learned that love is safest when distance is honored. A protector has learned that love is secure when energy is safeguarded. And so, wherever your archetype lands, the key is conscious choice, right? How do you hold boundaries from a place of love instead of fear? How can you invite co regulation, attunement, and honoring some of those relational rhythms while protecting your energy? And so, maybe a mini exercise to practice this week is identify one boundary that you want to practice. Maybe with your partner, maybe with your dog, maybe with someone at work, maybe with a friend. And just notice how it changes your energy, your connection, your sense of safety. Take that, moment to really step into the sensations that are coming up in your body. Where are you noticing contractions? Where are you noticing any signs of expansion? How is it really feeling to practice that boundary? Just an exercise to think of and kind of reflect and journal on. And as I bring this episode to a close, I just want to invite you to remember that boundaries are not walls. They are relational tools that allow love to flow freely with respect for your heart and the hearts of those you love. And so, I'm kind of reminded of when I started therapy a couple of years ago, almost I think 6 years ago. The image that I had of my relationship with boundaries was I was essentially in a bunker, and the bunker walls were my boundaries. They were all the guards that I had up. They were all, the ways that I was protecting myself from relationships outside, because everything outside felt like a battlefield, right? And so the kind of image that was coming to my mind was that I was just safe in this bunker with all of these walls up, and they were actually really, really protective of the unpredictability, of the chaos, of the, of the sense of the fact that everything outside just feels like a freaking battle. And over a period of time, the bunker walls kind of disappeared. And I think the image that the bunker walls have now been replaced with is, like a sliding window. I feel like now my relationship with boundaries is like a sliding window where I can slide them open when I want and I can slide them shut when I want. And what I'm learning to do is to give people a heads up when I'm shutting them and opening them, shutting them and opening them. And so that's really been my own evolution with boundaries. And so, again, what I find really helpful to do as well is, that kind of visualization. And again, I'm a visual learner, by the way, so for me, I think just putting things together visually is really, really helpful. But if that's something that works for you as well, I think to really think about, like, what is an image or a symbol or a feeling that you associate with your current relationship with boundaries. And as you kind of practice coming into a more nourishing relationship with boundaries, a freer relationship with boundaries, what does that image or symbol evolve into? Yeah. Till then, inviting you to honor your space, to trust your instincts, and to move through relationships with fierce, intuitive love.